What's going on? I am Recover 18. Season 4 of Diablo 4 is upon us, and it is just around the corner. We are going to be seeing a lot of interesting and new builds unlocked because of the itemization changes that are coming to Season 4. It basically unshackles all of the cool builds that you wish you could have used up to this point, and basically allows you to customize your gear through reforging and through masterworking. uh, there's a lot to talk about with that aspect of it. This is much more of a 1 to 100, and then there's going to be a little bit of a supplemental video to follow with this one, where I talk about masterworking and sort of squeezing that last little bit out of the build once you get to max level. We don't have our hands on the entire build set or what it's going to look like at 100 yet. I did do some PTR testing, so I have some sense of what it's going to look like, but I just want to let you know that there will be a supplemental video for this one coming soon, as well as with all of the other builds to come. The first build that we're going to be doing in Season 4 is a Druid build. This is a companion Raven Druid build centered around poison damage and companions. So we're going to talk about the talent tree, we're going to talk about the Paragon board, and skill choices, or gear choices, excuse me. Before I do that, I want to make sure everybody's subscribed to the channel here. Make sure you hit that sub button, like, and comment below. Helps us to grow. I do live stream this game. Season 4 is on May 14th. We'll be live streaming that day and all throughout Season 4. Look for some more build guides very soon. So without further ado, let's jump right in. This is, as I said, a Werewolf Companion Druid build. We're going with Claw, 5 out of 5 on the talent tree here. We're going to go Enhanced for that increased attack speed on Claw, and then Fierce Claw, which applies poison over 6 seconds. For our first set of passives, we're going to go Heart of the Wild, Abundance, 2 out of 3 for that one. So they generate more skill, or more spirit, excuse me. And then Wild Impulses for the increased damage, but also increased cost. This one also just buffs our spirit, mostly just grabbing that so that we can get to these two. What we're going to do next is come down to Shred. Go 5 out of 5 for the Shred. Go to Enhance for the attack speed and heal. And then we're going to go Raging Shred, which gives us a poison damage over time application. Okay, we are going to skip the core skills or the defensive skills here and just go with Ancestral Fortitude here. We're going to come down to our companion skills here, and we're going to go Wolves, 5 out of 5. Enhance for the attack damage to enemies that are slowed, poisoned, etc. Mostly, like, most every form of crowd control is impacted by that. We're going to come to Brutal Wolf Pack here and get that crit strike chance. For our Wolves, we're going to go Poison Creeper all the way to the end. Go Crit Strike chance for anything that is affected by Poison Creeper, which should be most everything, increased by 20% there. We're going to go Call of the Wild for 30% flat bonus damage to all our companion skills. This is the new one for this season. Companion builds have not been very viable for druids or in general in Diablo 4, but part of the reason this is more viable is because of the way this season has unlocked. I did a lot of testing on this particular build in Diablo 4 PTR, and I think it's going to really do well. There's some questions that I have about it that I'll talk about here in just a minute, but Ravens, 5 out of 5. Go down to Enhanced Ravens, and then hit up Brutal Ravens, which gives you more damage and an additional number of ravens there. We're going to skip the Wrath skills. We are going to grab 1 Neurotoxin to slow enemies. Any enemy that's poisoned will automatically be slowed, which will then also help to trigger some of the other effects. We're going to go 3 out of 3 for Toxic Claws. Crit strikes also apply a poison damage over time. And then we're going to come down to Lacerate, which is our ult. Go with the Heal, Prime Lacerate, and the Supreme Lacerate, which gives you crit strike bonus there. For our passive, we're going to go Lupine Ferocity for the increased damage and increased damage to injured. In terms of our spirit boons, these were recently reworked, I think, at the beginning of Season 3. It was either 2 or 3, I can't remember. But basically, you want to go Gift of the Stag for the maximum spirit, because everything's going to cost a little bit more, but you also want to be able to generate more. And we'll talk about one of the other reasons you want that as well. We're going to go Scythe Talon, which is increased crit strike chance. And for our second one here, this is going to be the double for the Avian. We're going to go Avian Wrath for the crit strike damage bonus. We're going to come down to Pack Leader and grab this 20% chance to reduce the cooldown on your companion skills. And then we're going to go crit strikes with shapeshifting skills, which should be all of your skills when this build is done. You're going to gain some heals, which will help with some of the survivability, which, by the way, is one of the main questions with this build. The damage is really well done in this build. You're going to have to make a lot of effort to increase your survivability as you progress deeper and deeper into the end game. But we'll address that here in just a minute. All right, next, we're going to talk about some gear priorities. Now, this is obviously in some ways a leveling build, in some ways it's idealistic. So keep that in mind as we progress through this. Let's talk about some of the gear priorities. One of the biggest and most important things that you're going to want to deal with here is Mad Wolf's Cleat. Single most important part of this build. It turns you into a werewolf at all times and gives you more for all of your werewolf skills. We're going to come down and do, these are some of the questions that I have with the new masterworking. I'm not sure that there's going to be a need for uniques in the way that there currently is in Diablo 4 or in seasons past. But these are the three that I would probably bank on being pretty popular: T-Balt's Will and Flicker Step. Obviously, if you get an Andariel's, or in this particular case, Andariel's Visage with the poison, or if you get the uber unique, which is the name escapes me off the top of my head. Harley Quinn. There we go. Sorry for that. The Harley Quinn's Caress is obviously going to make a huge difference there. But unless you have those two, I would go with Vigorous Aspect. Gain damage reduction while shapeshifted. So essentially it's going to give you a flat damage reduction and at all times, because you'll most likely or hopefully have Mad Wolf's Glee at some point. Some of the other important aspects that you're going to want to focus on here, at least in the early stages as you level up and get into the early to mid-late game, that's like what, 50 to 90, 50 to 95. You're going to want some of these. And then we'll do that supplemental video for like 100 plus into the deep end game. Aspect of the Stampede is super important, gives you more minions and damage bonus. We're going to go to Aspect of the Alpha is one that I would put on one of your weapons. You could also make a case here for the Great Staff of the Crone, but for the attack speed version of this build, which I think is going to be important, I would go Aspect of the Alpha on your one hand, and Night Howlers, not Night Howlers. It keeps re-adding that, and I don't know why. I want to go Edgemaster's Aspect, which gives you more damage for based on how much spirit you have, which is also why you choose Spirit Recycle and Max Spirit, so that you get a little bit of a boost there. X-Falls is really good because it causes any of your damage over time spells to explode or have the chance to explode. It does a lot of damage over time. You get some cooldown reduction. So that's a really good one. And then, you know, as we get further into the end game, things like Inexorable Will may be important. We may not necessarily want that. That's a good place to potentially replace a ring with a non-unique. In terms of the amulet, though, I would go Aspect of the Metamorphosis because it will give you a crowd control break, which is deeply important in the late end game. Some movement, and I would go with it obviously also gives you physical damage when you do that, and it triggers T-Bolt's Will damage bonuses as well. So those are some of the more important, like, aspirational things. As you level up, keep in mind the stats that you want to prioritize are attack speed, minion attack speed, minion damage, damage over time, poison damage, damage to poison targets, things like that are going to be really important. And then things like crit strike chance are obviously very important. And then you go down a little bit and you look at things like vulnerable damage, overall damage, things like that are also important. But things like overpower aren't as important. Damage while fortified, that becomes lesser. So I think those are the priorities that I would choose. So let's then dive into the most complicated aspect of this build, which is the Paragon board. So I'm going to zoom in here as far as I can so that you guys can see what I'm doing. And this is going to be the most complicated part of this. And what I will tell you is that this is the part that I spent the most amount of time on, because this is going to help you maximize the build. And then you can do some gear prioritization that makes you more comfortable with this as the basis if you want to. So first thing you want to do is come over to tenacity. I did skip this magic node because that 1 point does actually become important, and 50 armor doesn't make that much of a difference, especially given that the armor cap is very low this season. The amount of benefit that I think you can get from armor caps out. I think I wrote down 9,230 is the level 100 cap. After that, it doesn't benefit you anymore. So that is an easy skip there. And in other builds, just so you know, as you go, 9,230 damage or armor is the max cap at 100. So we're going to come over and grab Prime, come up to our first glyph, which is Wilds. Gives us at max level 191% companion skill damage. 3 of the 5 skills that we chose are companion skills. So that's a near 200% boost to all of that damage. And then you get the passive from companions, which is 120% more as well. That's an insane amount of extra damage just from one glyph slot. So grab that, max out all the intel choices along the way. We're going to come over and grab increases to resistances, always important at this point, especially into the end game. And as you're trying to do some of the boss ladder. First, major board that we're going to be choosing then is Lust for Carnage, which gives you Spirit Restoration on crit, which then helps you do more damage because you have more spirit. You can use the spirit generating and spending. It just becomes a cycle. It's a little bit of a free economy there. We're going to go into and skip the fleeting over here. Damage reduction over time, and like these are a little bit expensive to get to, and it's very niche, the instances where you're going to need that. We are going to come over and grab Ferocity and all of the attacks or the werewolf skill damages over here. We're going to come up and grab Regenerate, which gives us healing received and willpower. We're going to grab werewolf skill and werewolf skill damage. We're going to grab our second node, which is werewolf. No surprise there, which gives us a near 80% damage while in werewolf form. So all of our damage is in werewolf form with Mad Wolf's Glee. So we're going to get basically across the board 80% boost there. And you're going to gain 10% damage reduction on top of that while in werewolf form with Mad Wolf's Glee. That'll be at all times. So really, really valuable glyph there. Come on up to our third board, which is for Constricting Tendrils. Now, this one's an interesting one. Lucky hit. Nature magic skills, which are poison, have a 15% chance to entangle the enemy for free with vines, immobilizing them for 2 seconds, which makes them crowd controlled, trigger some of the talents we chose earlier, and then make them take poison damage up to 120% of the base damage dealt over 4 seconds. So that becomes basically a free poison creeper on top of everything else. You're going to result, it's going to result in everything getting pulled into you because of an inexorable will, and then crowd controlled, and then you're going to just, the cascading damage bonuses are going to trigger from that. We are going to come over and grab this Devastation, which is nature magic damage, which is poison, and all of these as well. And we're going to come over and grab our third glyph, which is Tracker. 97% damage at max level to poisoned enemies, and the effects of poison last 33% longer. Essentially, what's going to end up happening here is everything's going to end up poisoned on top of you shredding and lacerating and constantly attacking. So the damage is really, really well done here. It's going to result in some pretty insane damage. And then we're going to go nature skill damage over here. We're going to go nature's will. We are then going to wrap around, grab our legendary node, and come over to Superiority, which gives you damage to crowd controlled enemies. A lot of the time, they're going to be crowd controlled. So that's just a bonus there. Or if you're in a party with somebody else that's crowd controlling, most of the time that's going to happen. And then because it's also so expensive and because the usefulness declines, we're going to refuse the suffused resilience, and we're going to decline on denial here. We're going to come then over to our fourth and final Paragon board, and we're just able to come up to Heightened Malice, which is when there are 3 or more poisoned enemies nearby, you deal increased damage. Most of the time, that should be the case. Almost always, there should be 3 or more. Unless you're on a boss fight, in certain circumstances, there won't be. But 90% of this game, there are going to be 3 or more poisoned enemies around you because of this build, and you're going to deal a flat increase to damage there. So you are going to grab these nodes along the way. Poison Resilience for resilience damage. We're going to grab Toxic Bane for damage to poisoned enemies and poison damage, etc. We have to then, therefore, unfortunately skip Overturn in order to get up to the other ones. It becomes too expensive. You can't get both. And we're going to have to skip Poison Condition for the Poison Resist. Shouldn't be too much of a problem considering the other ones we picked up along the way. Fourth and final Paragon node is a little bit of a one that is up in the air, could be debated. You could do Exploit and go with a little bit of boost to exploit damage. But I actually went with just a 97% boost to all close enemies, which should be almost everything, considering Inexorable Will and all of the other crowd control you're doing. That is territorial. So we're also then going to gain some damage reduction, which is another reason that I chose it. Because we had to pass up on some of the other damage reduction, I went with the flat damage reduction here and with the gear choice on our helmet that I talked about earlier. We're going to go Sinking Feigns for damage to poisoned enemies, and we'll come down to Nature Born and all of these as well. At the end, you should end up with a ton of extra boosting damage that cascades off of each other and becomes very viable into and as a leveling build and into the late game. As I said, I will mention, or I will create a supplemental video later talking about some of the min and maxing for the masterworking that we will see towards the end of 100. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you over on the live streams for this game. There should be drops available for this. And the next guide video that we're going to be putting out is for a Bone Spear Bone Minion Swarm build. If you ever thought that you were going to see that again, hit that sub button, and I will see you again next time.